What began as a protest against a hike in bus fares has turned into a much larger issue. It started more than a week ago over a 9% fare increase for buses and subways in Sao Paulo. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets in violent clashes and arrested at least 120 people. It has since swelled into a broader demonstration against the government. Among other things, protesters are angry about the vast amounts of money spent on the World Cup, when they say money is needed to improve healthcare, education and other social programs. In a nationally televised address today, President Dilma Rousseff said her government was listening to the people and was committed to social transformation. For more analysis, I'm joined by protester and reporter Fernando Jones and Brazil's Deputy Sports Minister Luis Fernandes as well. Let's start with you, Fernando. Just tell us, try to explain exactly why you're protesting. Is the World Cup too simplistic a way of looking at it, or are you talking about your economic lifestyle and the problems you've been facing?
Actually, it's all about national priorities. We want health, we want education, and we want all of that to FIFA standards. You know, we can't stand it anymore. It's like, you want to give us something that we actually deserve. We pay the highest taxes in the world. It's like factual. So why can't we have what we pay for? Why can't we have education? Why can't we have the health care we need? You know, there are people dying in lines. There are federal hospitals. They're being torn down to be rebuilt. They haven't been rebuilt in 2 years. So where's all this money going to? You know, the Maracanã Stadium in Rio, it took R$1 billion to build it, and it was estimated for, I think, 400 million. You know, it's overspending. I don't know where they get all that money to go, you know.
Just to mention that the pictures that we're seeing of these large demonstrations right now on air, they're actually of Sao Paulo, whilst you're in Rio. But perhaps there's something bigger here out of the government's control. Brazil had this booming economy for many years, and there's been a big bite into that this year, and things have suddenly taken a turn for the worse, linked to the global economy, linked to the American economy, and that does happen. You've had a good time, and now it's going a bit negative, so it's not necessarily the government's fault.
Well, it's the government's fault if it takes 15 years to get to this point, you know. It's like no one really spoke out about this until this 20-cent thing for the fare hike, because nobody had the time to do it, and now the people are just fed up. It was the last straw, you know. It wasn't just 8 years of this government or the other government. It was every government since 1994, you know. The people can't take it anymore.
Let's speak to the Minister then, Luis Fernandes. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've got a real problem on your hands, haven't you? Because this is a protest that started over a relatively small thing, a mundane thing, some people would say, but it's tapped into a national nerve, and suddenly you've got this groundswell of opinion expressing itself in the most extraordinary way. You've lost control of this now, haven't you?
No, I wouldn't place it as loss of control. First of all, Brazil is a democratic country, and we recognize citizens' rights to freedom of expression, and that includes their right to organize whatever demonstration they want to organize in peaceful terms, to voice whatever grievance or demand they have. So, first of all, I think it's a basic democratic right. It's a constitutional right that has to be respected. I would like to separate the demonstrations, which are peaceful demonstrations, from acts of violence, which are committed by a small minority. And the acts of violence have been condemned by the demonstrators themselves. So I would think that is part of our vibrant democracy.
As our reporter was saying, in Sao Paulo today, there's quite an upbeat mood, actually, and the police are standing back. You're talking about how you're listening to these demonstrators. It's pretty clear what they're saying. They're not happy with the way your government is handling the economy. So how then are you going to respond when they're talking about specific things, schools, hospitals? You need to give them a response. You don't seem to be giving them anything specific.
Well, first of all, I think the demonstrations up to now, they have been very diverse. They started as a protest against hikes in transportation fares, and also due to the quality of the transportation wasn't seen as good. but they've taken on a huge array of items and topics without a clear focus. And they're directed not only against the state government or the city government, which is responsible for the fares themselves of public transport, but they've taken up a number of issues related to topics that are in discussion in Congress, related to the role of the media in Brazil, critical of the role of the media in Brazil. So it's a very broad array of questions and themes that are brought together by a thread of dissatisfaction with a number of issues. So we have to listen to these demonstrations, to their messages, when they are organized peacefully. That's part of our democracy. And we have to try to incorporate those grievances into public policies to deliver to these people. So we understand this as a natural democratic process.
Let's talk about your specific brief, because the World Cup is something that keeps coming up. As you say, there's a diverse range of concerns here, but it all comes down to the World Cup for many people, because the amount you're spending on that and the Olympics is unacceptable when the country doesn't have the basic means of going about life. That's what they're saying. So how are you justifying these huge costs?
Well, first of all, I'd like to qualify they. There's widespread support in Brazil among the population for our organization of the World Cup here in 2014, as well as for the Olympic Games in 2016. All opinion polls point into that direction. I would say there's widespread support amongst the demonstrators themselves of Brazil hosting these events. Now, Brazil is a developing country, so what we have planned is to incorporate into the opportunity of organizing the World Cup and the Olympic Games basic investments in infrastructure that specifically address a lot of the grievances that are being put forward by these demonstrations. For example, for the World Cup, our budget is a total budget for World Cup preparations around 33 billion reais. That's close to $16 billion. The main item of investment of that budget is investment in public transport, subways, bus systems. So that's addressing, through the World Cup, one of the main grievances that has been risen in these demonstrations. The same with health and education. There's absolutely no contradiction between organizing a World Cup and investing in health and education. On the contrary, the opportunity, the historical opportunity of organizing the World Cup have permitted us to step up investments in health, in education, in a number of areas, very diverse areas. We've been investing in qualification of people that will be working in the tourist sector for the World Cup. We've already qualified more than 120,000 workers, manual workers, and we will, and service workers that will be stepped up to 500,000 for the World Cup. I'm giving you just one small example. But our basic concern in the World Cup is to leave a lasting legacy for national and regional development in Brazil, guaranteeing social, economic, and environmental rights to our people.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're just going to go back to Fernando now, just to get your response from that, because the World Cup will have an economic benefit, and you are going to see that, but it's a long-term investment.
Well, it's kind of a long-term investment if you look at it that way, but ask him what is the legacy of the Pan American Games. Every single structure that was built practically for the Pan American Games was destroyed for the Olympics. Nothing was reused, you know. I don't see differences in education. I don't see differences in health. I can still, you know, if they're being invested in, I don't see them. I only hear complaints. I only hear people saying that their children are being put through school and they're being graduated illiterate. You know,
we'll put that back
it's not
Minister,
simple.
what did happen to the investment in those games and the promises the government made around them?
Well, basically, I think there's a lot of misinformation around the organization of the World Cup and the Olympic Games. It's not true that the structures that were set up for the Pan American Games as a whole are not being used will not be used for the Olympic Games. Just to give you two very concrete examples, one of the stadiums, the athletic stadium that will be used for the Olympic Games, was built for the Pan American Games and is now under scrutiny to correct some of the design problems that happened for the Pan American Games. The Maracanã Stadium was used for the Pan American Games, and it is being used both for the Confederations Cup and the World Cup, and will be used in its new modern form for the Olympic Games.
Luis
Now, the
Fernando,
basic
thank you very much. We do have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed. Also, Fernando Jones, it's a good debate, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. We appreciate your time.